For this video, I'm going to give a better example of my mica painting that I do on some of my resin work castings. In the past, I had been using this metal leaf glue by Speedball, and it does work fine. It is pretty runny though. So after I was introduced to the Elaine's Tack It Over and Over, I've decided I would like to try that on this piece today. I have a little bit here in a cup I've mixed with just a couple drops of water. You don't have to. I think any consistency you're happy with would work. So here we go. Okay, so on this particular piece, I like to try to get the top. It is rather 3D, so I will come back and get these sides and use a much smaller brush for some of these smaller areas. It just would take a long time to use a small brush like this for the entire surface. I've done this piece a couple times for a jewelry box. I think he is just called the Green Man. So you can come back with a little brush if you think you've missed a spot, get a lot of the crevices. He's pretty detailed around the eyes. This will dry clear. You just don't want it to be super lumpy when you start working. That would show on the surface. I also choose to do a lot of my castings in black because I feel like the mica shows up a lot better. This will take about 20 minutes to dry. And then I'll come back and do some of the edges. There's a couple pieces on here that won't be green like the little acorns, so I'm not really concentrating on them. Plus, I try to come back and color his eyes, and it's pretty difficult. They're really small, but we'll see what I can do, and if it'll look halfway decent when I'm done. But when this is dry, I will come back and show you the next step. Okay, so this is dry now. I did go back and do a second coat of the Elaine's Tack It Over and Over. And as you can see, it does dry transparent. This is a color I like to use for the base of this particular project. It's called Seagrass. It's really bright and yellow, but this is just the base coat. I will be coming back and show how I put highlights into some of the little details. This is pretty messy. Mica powder is very fine and it will fly all over the place. If you are able to sit outside to do this, you might prefer that. And I do recommend wearing at least a dust mask so you don't breathe it all in. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start and show you what I'm doing. Okay, so you can see I did get one of the acorns and there's a little bit of dust on them and also in his eyes. And I don't particularly want the green there, so I'm going to show you how I fix that. If you see that you've missed an area, you can go ahead and apply some more of the Elaine's Tack It Over and Over, let it dry, and go right back over it. And I'm going to show that when I come back and do some of the highlights in those areas. So I'm actually going to take an air can and blow off any excess mica, and then I'll come back and show you my little tips and tricks on getting off the areas that I didn't necessarily mean to be green. Alright, so I've blown off the excess mica. I'm going to use a typical alcohol wipe like you would get from a pharmacy and a toothpick. And I'm going to go into those little eyes of his and show you how easy it is to take this off. There's also this acorn here. It won't be perfect, but I am going to be covering it. You can go over this with the alcohol several times if need be. You can use those little makeup applicator brushes if you find that easier. This is just what I have on hand, so that's what I'm doing. You can see how much of it's picked up. So that's what I'm going to sit here and do for a few minutes. Then I will get out the small paintbrush and Elaine's Tack It Over and Over and the other colors that I like to highlight him with, and I will show you how I go about doing that. Alright, so I have finished just touching up and kind of cleaning up the loose mica, and I've got my mixture of the Elaine's Tack It Over and Over here. Just any little cheap paintbrush you can get. Just make sure that it's not so cheap that the bristles are falling out. And then I go back right over the areas I've already applied mica to that I want to add some highlights into. It's going to be the same thing. You're going to put it where you want it, let it dry, it'll be clear, and then you can do some highlighting. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry, and then I have some colors picked out. These metallics are actually a mica used for nail art, and I find they stand out really well and they color very nicely. I will put a link below on the video if you're interested in finding these. To clean up the brush, I just used 90% alcohol and clean it off, and it can be used a few times before it just gets so sticky that you'll throw it away and get another one. I think you can get a pack of about 20 of these off Amazon for less than $10. Now that that's dry, I'm going to come back in the areas where I applied the tacket for the highlights and put this darker green. It doesn't take much at all. Okay, so now I can move on to the next area of shading I would like to do. As you can see, this is kind of going to work in layers. I haven't had any problems with the glue gumming up or becoming so thick that I lost detail. I imagine if you absolutely got a ball of it on there and just let it dry, that could happen. But as long as you're applying it in these thin layers, I don't seem to have a big problem with that. All right, I have to let that dry. Just a game of patience, and I'll be back. but he's starting to take shape, and you can kind of see where I'm going with this. I do have a little more in the shadowing that I'd like to do, and I usually use something like white nail polish to do his eyes in the corners, and then some blue to give him some color. So not quite done yet. Alright, so at this point I've gone back and done a second coat over the acorns, and I also applied some of the Elaine's Tack-It over and over into the same highlight areas that I did some darker greens in here. I like to come back, this is just my preference, and I use a product by Solar Color Dust called Hyper Holo. It's a very fine holographic glitter, and I stick that down with the Elaine's. To me, it adds just a little extra sparkle and shine and makes him look pretty neat. I'm not sure that you can see that sparkle in person. Cameras never really seem to catch the sparkle that comes from holographic glitters and such, as well as the naked eye. So as you can see, this stuff is very fine. It kind of flew all over the place. It's good to have something like this. It'll kind of stick to it, so when you go to clean up, you just fold this up and it's contained. As far as getting any excess off of here, I will step outside with a typical electronics duster can and spray it off, and it should only be concentrated where the Elaine's Tack-It over and over had last been applied. I will come back and do more Elaine's in some concentrated areas like his mustache and chin and eyes, and I'll apply a black that is the same product. So that is the next step. I'll see you then. One more time to go blow off the excess holographic glitter, and then I'm going to come back and do his eyes. I do not have the most steady hands out there. I like to do the whites with some white nail polish and the tip of a toothpick, and find something kind of blue in some clear, usually a little mica, and come back and do the iris. And I have some black nail polish if I need to redot his pupils. Like I said, sort of a fidgety little thing, and where it runs over on the edges, I'll come back with more of the Elaine's and just a touch of the green when it's dry. And because this is nice and glossy, if you kind of get the mica on it, you can fidget with it some more with some rubbing alcohol to keep your whites white and the green green. Somebody out there is probably a lot better at this than me, but you get the point. So after a lot of fussing with a couple different colors of nail polish, I got his eyes done. There was some colorful language in there, definitely. Those tiny little areas are not my specialty. But that is what he will look like done. And then I clear coat him with Rust-Oleum 2 times gloss clear to get rid of any sticky that's still there from the Elaine's Tack It over and over, and not leave fuzz and fingerprints and such while I move on to the next step. So this will be part 1 to this video. The next part, I'm going to show how I put him on a jewelry box and turn it into the Green Man theme. Just as a preview, this is the box I usually start with. I get these at Hobby Lobby. You can get them on sale for around $6. It's put in with a mirror, as you can see. And there's 2 small wooden dowels, or pins if you want to call them that keep that lid in place. You can actually push them out. If you see that little dot, that's it right there. And take the lid off, and I highly suggest that you tape the mirror when you stain or paint. It'll save you a lot of heartache. I've already stained this one. It's a Royal Pine Green by Minwax, old can there. And this is with the lid off and everything taped up. This one looks a little blue to me, but I'm not done yet. There's some highlighting I'm going to do that really makes it pop. The end result will be him with some dry flowers. So I will see you in the next part when we start this.